probably the most important part of WordPress and the first place that you want to poke around in and get familiar with is the dashboard in WordPress. And generally speaking, the dashboard in WordPress might look slightly different than this when you load it up, but all of the menu items on the left are where you have access to create content. On the top of this black bar, you have access to your profile. And generally speaking, when we talk about using WordPress, we talk about the front end and the back end. And when we talk about the back end, what we mean is the dashboard. What we mean by the front end is, of course, the website that you're building in WordPress. And usually the best way to work is to have the front end open in one tab in your browser and the back end open in the other. So if I go to my local host and load up my website, this is, of course, the front end, and this is the back end. You can always get to the back end or the dashboard of your site by typing in the URL/wp-admin. So there's three main ways that you can change the look and the structure of your WordPress site. Every WordPress site comes with a theme all loaded up. So the easiest way to change the look of your site is you can simply choose a different theme. The second way that you can change the look of your site is to make a child theme. The third way to change the look of your site is by using the customizer. And it is definitely the case that no matter what, it's almost impossible to really customize or change the look of your site or implement the design that you might have mocked up in Photoshop or another graphics program without having some content on your site. So even before you start to think about changing the look of your site, the first thing that you often want to do on WordPress is generate some dummy content or some working content. So before we create some content, let's just dive a little deeper into the dashboard. And you'll notice that your admin interface on your dashboard has roughly 3 sections. Now, every theme is a little bit different, but you will notice that there is this home area, and all of these menus are movable. You can dismiss that menu if you wish. Then you have your content area, and then right below that you have the area where you have all of your appearance, your settings. It's sort of your admin functions. The screen options menu is fairly important to be aware of because sometimes things in your dashboard are going to be hidden by default. So it's worth looking in the screen options menu. And you should know that the screen options menu is contextual. So it's going to have different elements under there depending on what screen you're looking at in your dashboard. So if you ever find yourself in your posts dashboard area or your pages dashboard area and you were expecting to see something and you're not seeing it there, it's always worth having a look under the screen options so that you can see if perhaps it's been hidden by default. The help menus in WordPress are also contextual, so if you're having trouble, if there's something you don't remember, if there's something that you can't find, it's always worth having a look under the contextual help menus as well. So let's just go to the front end for a second and have a look at the toolbar. Now, on the left of the toolbar, there are more options under that icon. There's also the customizer menu. But what's very, very handy about this black toolbar that you'll see at the top is that you can always edit whatever page you're looking at in that moment. You can edit it directly from that toolbar. The other thing you need to know about the black toolbar, and it's something that sometimes you need to clarify for clients, is that it only shows for logged in users. So we talked already about pages and posts and media as being the three most important content types in WordPress. And we saw that there are menu items for pages and posts and media in the dashboard. So pages are standalone. They themselves are usually static. So in other words, they have content that rarely changes, or they are a static empty box into which you might flow dynamic content in the form of posts. Pages can be organized in parent-child relationships. In other words, pages can be your sections on the website, and they can include subsections that are also pages. So the author of a page, the publishing time of a page, the category of a page, none of that matters. So pages are essentially timeless, they're static, they're permanent. You find them in the menus on a site, and they're meta-level content. They talk about the site and its content. They're not the actual content itself. And there are many types of pages that serve up lists of content in addition to pages that simply have their own static content on them. So as I mentioned, it's very difficult to work in WordPress without some content. So let's make first some pages. What I've done here is I actually have gone in my dashboard in the appearance menu under themes, and I have activated 2016. 2016 is the parent theme that I'm going to be working with. And we are eventually going to make a child theme based on 2016, but we don't need to do that quite yet because right now all we're going to be working on is getting some content into this site so that we can more easily work with the look and feel. So if I go under my content menu, I'm going to go under my pages menu here, and you'll see that I get a different sort of a pages dashboard. I'm actually going to delete these sample pages that WordPress adds in here, and I'm going to add my own. Typically, you want to make a home page. Very simple. I just typed home as the title and I went over and I published. Maybe let's add a little bit of content that just says this is the home page. Just going to update that. If you scroll down, you'll see that there's some other things that we can do here. We could add a featured image. We're not going to do any of that for now with our home page or any of our other pages. We're really just going to make some pages so that we get a little bit better of an understanding of the difference between pages and posts. The other kind of a page that we might typically want on, say, a 4-page website is we might want an about page. I'm going to publish that. We might also want a contact page. And finally, we're going to want to have a blog on this website because we're going to want to be generating some articles, some blog posts to drive traffic to our site. Now, once you've got those pages in place, let's have a look at the front end of our site. And you'll notice that nothing has changed. Where did they go? Let's go back into the back end and have a look at all of our pages. So our pages are there, but we have not told our WordPress website where to put them. So we're going to go under the Appearance menu to Menus, and we're going to need to create a new menu. Now, sometimes the dashboard screens that you might be seeing if you're working in a different theme than 2016 will look slightly different. But the principle is always the same. Generally speaking, you need to create your menus in WordPress. And every theme has a specific and potentially limited number of menus that it will allow you to create. So let's create a new menu. We're going to need to give it a name. This is going to be our main navigation menu. And if I scroll down a little bit, as soon as WordPress makes the menu, it's asking me to define where I want to display this menu. And in this theme, I have two choices of menu. I can have a primary menu or a social links menu. This is going to be my primary menu. And I'm just going to want to add my pages. So here's all my pages. As you can see, it would have been very difficult, really impossible to make a menu without already having made some pages. I'm going to add them to the menu. What's great about WordPress is you can very easily drag your menu items into the order that you want. The other thing to keep in mind is that you always need to save your work. Now if I go back on the front end and refresh, I see that I have my menu. Now what are posts? That's the other of the three main content types in WordPress. So posts are what we would typically understand as articles or blog posts. They're usually involve text and images. They're organized using categories and tags, and this is very important. And they tend to be displayed by WordPress in reverse chronological order on the page that they flow into. So you need to have a content strategy for your website before you start building, because you will really use the categories as a way to define which posts go where on a site. In the case of what we're about to build, we're just going to build a simple portfolio site. So it's going to be fairly simple. But generally speaking, posts have to be categorized. And you might think about posts as the basic content type on your site. So in our case, if it's a portfolio website, we're going to use the post content type for each of our portfolio pieces, in addition to using the post content type for all of our articles and blog posts that we're going to write to drive search traffic. Posts are timely, they're current, the date matters usually, they're related to one another, they're sortable, and it's the kind of content that people often want to share. Just going to go into our dashboard, and in our content area, it is under its own menu called Posts. So again, I'm going to get rid of the default Hello World post in WordPress and add one of my own. So I'm going to call this Blog Post 1. Now, before I hit publish, I'm just going to scroll down and show you that the menu is a little bit different. The main thing that's different is we have the same featured image. We're not going to add any of those just yet. But the main thing that's different is we have all of these different formats we can choose for posts. I'm going to suggest that we just leave it at standard, because right now we're still working in our parent theme and we're only really working on getting some dummy or working content in there. So leave that as is. But this is also really important. It is that there are categories that we can apply to the post. So I'm going to add a category here, project management. And what you don't want to have is a whole bunch of posts on your website that are uncategorized. So we're going to deal with that in a minute. Let's publish it and then we'll see. So the date really matters in WordPress. We'll see why in a moment. Before we have a look into that, let's just make a few more posts. I'm just scrolling down. I'm going to make another category here. Publish. And I'm going to make one more. I could categorize that in design, but I'm going to add also the category of UX design. And I can categorize it as both, and that is fine. Now, before we go back onto the front end of our site and have a look at where those posts have gone to, let's just have a quick peek into categories. Now, I'm going to say up front, I'm not really going to talk about tags at all. I don't tend to use them on simple sites, but I do use categories quite a bit. And if I click on the categories tab, I can see that there's my categories that I made. So you can make your categories right on the post, or you can come into this category section and make your categories. Now, we said that this was going to be a portfolio site. So I think I'm going to need the category of portfolio, and that's how I'm going to organize any posts that need to go into an eventual portfolio section. So I'm going to add that category. And you'll see that it has popped up over in my categories menu. Now, the last thing we want to do before we leave this area is we actually want to get rid of uncategorized. It's not possible to get rid of uncategorized by deleting it because it's sort of the default that WordPress puts in there. However, we can edit it. So I'm going to edit this and call this content strategy. And because I'm editing it, I have to actually do something that I don't tend to need to do when I make other categories. WordPress does it for me, but in this case, I do need to edit the slug. And that's all fine. I'll just update that. So what that does is it just means that I'm never going to have that very amateurish thing happen, which is that some of my posts go up uncategorized. I'm just going to go on the front end. Now, what has happened is that my posts have all gone onto my home page. And if I click on my blog, they're not there. And the reason is because we haven't really done any setup on some of the other essential settings in the dashboard of WordPress. So let's have a look under the settings menu. We'll go through it piece by piece. So the first place we're going to have a look is Settings General. There's a lot of things that you can change in this page that you set up when you were doing your install, and now you can change them. So I'm going to leave my site title as working site, but I don't really want it to say just another WordPress site. I'm going to call it Sample Portfolio Website. And that all the rest of this looks okay. I tend to prefer my week to start on Sunday. I'm going to save those changes. Next, let's have a look under writing. This is where the category is important because what has happened is because I turned uncategorized into the category of content strategy, it is now the default post category. That's fine, I can leave it at that, but I actually think I'm just going to save it as design because if I forget to add a category, that's probably going to work for most of what I write. The default post format, I can leave it at standard, but it's important to know that you can change it under there. And that is all fine. The next place we're going to look is reading, and this is another really, really important place in your settings menu. And here is where we can solve that problem that our blog posts are showing up on our home page and not on our blog page. And it's because that's the default in WordPress. The default is that the home page will display our latest posts. We don't want that. We want our home page to display a static page, in fact, the one that we called home. Now, this would not be able to be set by you if you didn't make some dummy content. And we want our posts to go to the blog. There's some other things that we can address in this list. We can have all of our posts be shown only as a summary on that front blog page so that users would need to click through and read the full text, or we can show it as full text. I'm going to change that to summary. And this is also where you can check or uncheck the button to discourage search engines from indexing your site. Now, because this is on my local host, this doesn't really matter. Search engines can't find my site. But this is definitely something that you would want to uncheck when you launch a client site. The other important setting area is discussion. It's usually the case that I don't want people to be able to comment on my posts, especially if it's a portfolio site. So I'm actually going to uncheck all of these. Now, it could be the case that your client wants commenting, in which case you would need to come in here and make sure that the appropriate things were checked. But mostly I just want to turn commenting off. I'm going to show you this media settings page. We're not going to make any changes, but you should be aware that every theme has very specific sizes and settings for how it will version your images. In other words, when I upload an image into WordPress, it will determine that this is the size that this theme will use in pixels for the large size, this is medium, and this is thumbnail. You might find, for example, that this thumbnail size is too small for your style, but we're gonna worry about that a little bit later when we implement our child theme. You should, however, know that it's there. I don't need to save because I didn't do anything. The permalinks settings are extremely important. Now, if I was working on something like a news site, I might want the date and the name of the post. But because this is a portfolio site, I actually don't really want the date to display in my URLs. What I absolutely don't want is plain URLs. This is very non-search friendly. Instead of showing the title of the post or the name of the page, it's going to show an ID number. Really not a good idea to leave it plain. So I'm just going to check off post name and save those changes. So now if we go back to the front end of our site and refresh, just show you on our home page, we're just seeing our home page. And on our blog page, we're seeing our posts in reverse chronological order. Some things that you might want to keep in mind when you're making posts, they are saved as a draft automatically, but it's never a bad idea to save frequently. And sometimes it's even a better idea to create that content outside of WordPress and copy paste it in. If you do create your content outside of WordPress and copy paste it in, you need to be a little bit careful that you're not copy pasting a lot of formatting as well. You can also edit the permalinks on your posts and preview the page. So let's have a quick peek at what all of that means. I'm going to actually click into my blog post 3. Now I'm on that post page and I can just go right there and edit my post. This is what WordPress means by the permalink. Right now it's just showing the title. If I wanted, I could change that, but generally speaking, it's a good idea if your links are a match to your title. You should know that the title of the post is the H1. So if you want to do any formatting inside your post, you can use this what you see is what you get menu, or this WYSIWYG menu. It's very similar to the kinds of formatting you might see in word processor. But if I did want to, for example, turn something into a heading, you'd probably want to start with an H2. because the title is going to be the H1 on this page. I can see more menu items if I click on this toolbar toggle. That's handy. And if I want to see the HTML that goes into making up my post, and if in fact I want to work in HTML, you could always code your posts in Sublime and then copy paste your HTML into here. And there's not a whole lot of HTML happening here, but I can see that this has been tagged as an H2. Some important notes about categories and tags. They're taxonomies, so they're sorting systems or organizing systems. Now, every post has to belong to at least one category, but as we've seen, it can belong to more than one. And we saw how it's important to get rid of that uncategorized default and change your default so that it's something meaningful. And you always want to try and remember to add a category. Categories can also be hierarchical. They can have parent-child relationships. Again, this is important when you're making a website with any kind of complexity where you might want to determine sections based on categories. Now, we're going to be doing that for the portfolio section of our site. The publishing panel of your posts is very important because you can schedule posts to be published at a later time. You can save posts as a draft for review by someone else. You can also change the publish date, and that will change the position of your post in the stream. So if you wanted something to be at the top of the list of posts at all times, you could change the publish date to be most recent, or you could make it a sticky post. Let's have a look at how that works. So because I published blog post number 3 most recently, it's sitting at the top of the stream. If I go onto my front end, it's at the top. But it could be that I want blog post number 1 to be at the top at all times. So there's two different ways I could do that. One is I could change the publish date to be more recent. But the other is I could make it a sticky post. Now, sticky post is in a very cleverly hidden place. It's under visibility. So I'm just going to go under visibility, and I can stick this post to the front page and update it. Now, when it says the front page, it doesn't mean the home page. It means whatever page we have determined that it is going to flow into. In our case, that is the blog page. So I just went to my blog page, I refreshed, and there it is at the top. Let's say I make another post. Say I've written a post, but I don't want to publish it until next week. I can save it as a draft, and I can set the publish date, or I can simply leave it as a draft. So what do we mean by index pages? Index pages in WordPress mean that they are indexes or lists of other content. So in our case, our blog page, we have said it should be an index page. In other words, it's an empty shell that is going to represent a list in reverse chronological order of all of the posts we publish. Typically, index.html or index.php would be the home page on a website. And when WordPress first started, when blogs first began, that was typically the home page. And on a simple blog, you probably want your home page to be the index of all of your posts. In our case, we're making a slightly more complex website. We're going to make a portfolio website. So we've determined that our blog page is essentially going to be the index page. We saw when we were looking at our pages and our posts that we can add a featured image. So let's add a featured image to one of our posts. I'm just going to scroll down. I'm in blog post 4. and click on Set Featured Image. Now, as soon as I click on that button, I'm being taken into the WordPress media library, and it's asking me to upload a file. So I'm going to find an image. It's important before you go ahead and set featured image that you make sure that you fill in the metadata about the image, especially the alt text. I don't really need a caption on this image, but I do want to, for accessibility reasons, I always want to fill in the alt text. And then I can set the featured image. So WordPress is going to show me in my dashboard that I have set the featured image, but it doesn't really show me any kind of a view of what it looks like. So I'm actually going to publish this post so that we can have a look at how that is going to look on our website. I need to scroll down because I've made blog post number 1 sticky at the top. So there's my blog post with my image. So I get a sense of how much room the featured image is going to take up. And in fact, if I click into my blog post, looks very similar. Something that you should be aware of, however, is what happens with those images when you upload them through the media library. We go back into our dashboard. In our content area, we have a link directly into the media library. So let's have a look. I can see there is my image that I've already uploaded. I can add new images. So where do these go? Do they go into the database? Not exactly. What happens in our database is that the link to this image is associated with the blog post, which I've set it for the featured image as. But where the images actually go is into our files. So let's just have a quick look at what that means. I'm going to go into my WordPress files here. And in fact, in WP content, my images are going into this uploads folder. And the thing that I wanted to point out to you is we've only uploaded the one image, and there it is. And the original size, I guess, was 1024 by 768 pixels. But what WordPress has done in that upload, it has created a number of versions of our image. And this is so that this theme can be responsive. So I have different image sizes for all of the media queries in the style sheet of this theme. And it has given me a 150 by 150 thumbnail, which is a square. My image was not originally a square. So generally speaking, when you install your theme and then install your child theme, which we're going to get to, you want to make sure that the settings that we saw in our settings menu under Settings Media are what we want, because this will be set as you upload your images, and it's pretty much impossible to change. If you upload a whole bunch of images and you realize that you want a bigger thumbnail, you actually will need to change the settings and then go back and re-upload all of your images. So it's important to understand where the media library puts these. The other thing that's important to understand is that you can't add images to your WordPress site simply by dragging them into that uploads folder. They have to go in through the media library, because in doing so, WordPress is generating all of the metadata associated with that image, and it's versioning the images in all those different ways.